Welcome to Simplified UPSC by PPP, where we listen, learn, and grow together. Detailed lecture notes in English and Hindi, plus practice questions for prelims and mains, only on our Telegram channel. Link in description. Like and subscribe for more.
Okay, let's unpack this. We are embarking on a deep dive today into, well, one of the most intellectually ambitious concepts in global environment policy, the Biosphere Reserve.
That's right. It's a fascinating one. When you look at global conservation, the Biosphere Reserve, or BR, it kind of stands apart. It fundamentally shifts the goal. It's not just about fencing off nature. The sources call it the mission of reconciliation, which is a powerful phrase.
Reconciliation, yeah.
It's about fitting humanity and nature back together, really, not just treating people as, an external threat you have to keep out.
And that mission is definitely not simple, especially when you think about places facing huge development pressures like India. So for anyone trying to really get a handle on comprehensive environment governance, understanding this BR philosophy, it feels essential. But let's start globally. This wasn't cooked up in India, was it? It has deeper roots at UNESCO.
Exactly. You have to start with the Man in the Biosphere Program. MB, for short. This was the foundation, launched by UNESCO way back in the early 1970s.
The early 70s.
Right. And that timing is important. The world was waking up to the fact that conservation needed, a proper scientific basis. And not just science about pristine wilderness, but science about managing that tricky intersection of human activity and natural systems.
So the MAB program wasn't just some bureaucratic thing. It was a real commitment then to find a scientific way for people and their environments to get along better globally.
Precisely. It acknowledged that, conservation just wouldn't work if it ignored basic human needs.
Makes sense.
So the BR itself, it's basically a site, a place established by a country and then recognized under this MA program. And the whole point is to promote sustainable development. But, and this is key, it has to be done through local community efforts and sound science. The aim is for them to be, and I'm quoting here, living examples of how human beings and nature can coexist.
Living examples.
Yeah.
That really captures the challenge, doesn't it?
Yeah.
You're asking one area to be both a hotspot for conservation and a place where people live and work and develop economically.
Yeah.
So this core idea, this mandate to reconcile conservation with economic and social development, that's what really sets a BR apart.
Absolutely. And because that reconciliation is so complex, the source material breaks down the BR mandate into three very specific functions or objectives. You really need all three working together for a site to get that international MAB recognition. It's like a three-legged stool.
Okay, let's walk through that triad, starting with the one we probably all expect, conservation.
Right. Conservation is the bedrock, obviously. The goal here is conserving landscapes, ecosystems, species, and crucially, genetic variation.
Genetic variations.
Yeah.
Why is that singled out?
Well, think about it. It's not just about saving, say, the tigers you see today. It's about protecting the deep gene pool within that population and across all the species there. That genetic diversity is what gives ecosystems the resilience to cope with future changes like, climate change or disease.
Ah, okay. So it's about future-proofing the ecosystem in a way.
Exactly. Protecting that evolutionary potential. It's a huge task.
Okay, so that's conservation. But here's where the BR really starts to differ from, say, a traditional national park. The second function, development.
Yes, the development mandate. This requires the BR to actively foster economic and human development. But, and it's a big but, that development has to be socioculturally and ecologically sustainable.
And that sounds like the tricky part, the inherent tension.
It is. It's the biggest management challenge. You're trying to improve people's lives and livelihoods within the reserve boundaries, but whatever activities they undertake, farming, forestry, maybe some small-scale industry, it mustn't undermine that core conservation goal.
Right. And ensuring that sustainability, that sounds like it needs constant attention. You can't just draw lines on a map and hope for the best.
You really can't.
Yeah.
Which brings us perfectly to the third function, the one that kind of holds the other two, conservation and development, together. Logistics support.
Logistics support. What does that entail exactly?
This is maybe the least glamorous, but possibly the most vital function. It means the BR must support research, monitoring, education, and information exchange. It's not just a nice to have, it's the core of the management system. It's how you know if the sustainable development is actually sustainable.
Oh, I see. So you need constant scientific monitoring, like
Yeah.
tracking wildlife, checking water quality, understanding how local economies are doing.
Exactly. And then, crucially, using that information to adapt your management plan. It's adaptive management built in.
So the BR model explicitly acknowledges that you won't get it right the first time, that management has to evolve based on evidence.
That's the idea. If a particular livelihood project starts having negative ecological impacts, the logistic support function demands that you spot it, understand it, and then change course. The science is the check and balance.
That's quite sophisticated.
And it's not just local. This logistic support idea extends globally through the World Network of Biosphere Reserves, WNBR.
Okay, the WNBR, what's its role?
Think of it as the global network connecting all these individual BR sites. It's how they share knowledge, best practices, what worked, what didn't. So a success story in, say, India might provide lessons for a BR facing similar challenges in Africa or South America. It leverages global scientific expertise.
Okay, so you have this ambitious velocity reconciliation backed by three functions: conservation, development, logistics, and a global network. But here's where it gets really interesting for me. The actual design. How do you manage this on the ground? Given the potentially conflicting goals, you mentioned it can't be managed uniformly, the sources point to a critical design element.
Zonation.
Zonation. Yes, that's the absolute key to the physical structure. It's the blueprint for coexistence, you could say. It allows you to spatially separate the different activities like strict protection versus sustainable use, but keep them functionally linked. So every BR is designed with three distinct but connected zones: the core, the buffer, and the transition area.
All right, let's break those down, starting right at the heart. The core zone. What are the hard and fast rules here? The core zone. Its purpose is purely ecological. It must be kept absolutely undisturbed. That's the golden rule. It needs to have suitable habitat for lots of species, often including those top predators that need large areas. And crucially, it might contain centers of endemism.
Endemism, meaning species found nowhere else.
Exactly. So the core zone is like the Fort Knox for the region's unique biodiversity and genetic resources.
And human activity. Is anything allowed?
Very, very little. The core secures strict legal protection. Often an existing national park or a wildlife sanctuary might form the core of a BR. The source is crystal clear. The only activities permitted are carefully controlled research projects that do not affect natural processes and wildlife.
So no logging, no farming, no tourism.
None. And it has to be kept free from all human pressures external to the system as much as possible. It's the ecological sanctuary.
Okay, crystal clear. Now, moving outwards, we hit the buffer zone. What happens here? Human interaction starts, I presume.
It does, but it's still very much managed with the core zone's protection in mind. The buffer zone surrounds or lies adjacent to the core. The guiding principle here is that any activity happening in the buffer must be designed to help, or at least not hinder, the conservation goals of the core. It acts as a protective cushion.
Right, buffering the core from more intense human activity further out. So what kind of activities are allowed in the buffer zone?
The list is quite specific according to the source. You can have scientific research, maybe slightly more hands-on than in the core. You have monitoring. You can also have training programs, environmental education activities for schools or communities. And significantly, this is where you often find managed ecotourism and recreation.
Ah, ecotourism. So generating some income and awareness.
Exactly. The idea is that the benefits generated here, financial or educational, should ideally flow back to support the overall conservation effort, including the core zone.
Okay, so core is strict protection. Buffer allows limited compatible human activities. That leaves the outermost ring, the transition area.
Also sometimes called the area of cooperation.
Area of cooperation.
Yeah.
Interesting. And this is often the largest zone, right? What defines this area?
Absolutely. The transition area is the outermost part, and this is where the BR concept really shows its unique focus on integrating people. The primary focus here shifts explicitly to community involvement and broad stakeholder participation. It's called the area of cooperation because making it work depends entirely on collaboration between, well, everyone, local communities, managers, scientists, NGOs, cultural groups, private enterprises, government agencies.
A complex web of interests.
Definitely. And this is the zone where you typically find human settlements, agriculture, managed forestry, and other economic activities.
So what's permitted here in terms of economic activity? Is it a free-for-all?
Not at all. The key is promoting sustainable economic and human activities. Activities that are based on using resources in a way that's socioculturally and ecologically sustainable. So yes, people live here, farm here, maybe run businesses, but the overarching goal is to do so in ways that don't degrade the environment and, ideally, support the conservation objectives of the inner zones.
So the source talks about broad-basing stakeholders and improving livelihoods here.
Yes, that's central. It's about ensuring local people benefit from being part of the Biosphere Reserve, finding ways to improve their standard of living sustainably, and it's also about actively trying to resolve those inevitable conflicts between development needs and conservation goals. That happens largely in the transition area.
Wow. Okay. So it's a really intricate design. Strict protection in the core, managed use in the buffer, and cooperative sustainable development in the transition. The success of the whole thing seems to really hang on getting that transition area management right.
It absolutely does, and that complexity brings us neatly to India. India being a megadiversity hotspot with, enormous population pressures. The BR model is incredibly relevant, but also incredibly challenging to implement effectively on the ground.
Right. Our source material mentions that India launched its own National Biosphere Reserve program back in 1986. What was the thinking behind that?
Well, there were two main drivers mentioned. First, India wanted to represent its incredible biodiversity by aiming to designate at least one BR in each of its major biogeographic provinces, a strategic goal. And second, it was about making the BR concept work in the Indian context. That meant ensuring local people were involved in management and finding ways to improve their livelihoods through sustainable resource use right from the start.
So 1986 was the starting point. The source lists 18 sites designated nationally since then. Let's maybe walk through them, perhaps grouping the early ones.
Sure. The very first one, the pioneer, was Nilgiri in 1986. A huge area covering parts of Tamil Nadu, Kerala, and Karnataka, foundational. Then in 1988, we got two more, Nanda Devi up in Uttarakhand, High Himalayas, and Nokrek over in Meghalaya, known for its citrus gene pool.
Okay, Nilgiri, Nanda Devi, Nokrek. Then a bit of a cluster in 1989, focusing on coasts and islands.
That's right. 1989 was a busy year. We saw Great Nicobar designated in the Andaman and Nicobar Islands. Also the Gulf of Mannar in Tamil Nadu, a critical marine ecosystem. And up in the northeast, Manas and Assam. And finally, the massive mangrove system of the Sundarbans in West Bengal.
4 in 1 year. Wow, okay, moving into the 1990s, the focus seemed to shift a bit.
Yeah, expanding into central and eastern India mainly. In 1994, Similipal in Odisha was designated, a large forested area. Then Dibru-Sekha in Assam in 1997, another important one in the northeast. Followed by Dahang Dibang in Arunachal Pradesh in 1998, very remote, very diverse. And central India got Pachmarhi in Madhya Pradesh in 1999, known for the Satpura ranges.
Right, we're getting through the list. What came next? Post-2000. High-altitude sites, maybe.
Exactly. In 2000, the stunning high-altitude landscape of Kangchenjunga in Sikkim was added. Then down south again, Agasyamala, spanning Kerala and Tamil Nadu in 2001, part of the Western Ghats.
Okay. And the later designations, there were quite a few in the 2000s.
Yes. Achanakmar Amarkantak in 2005, which covers parts of Chhattisgarh and Madhya Pradesh, a really important watershed area. Then the vast, unique landscape of the Great Rann of Kutch in Gujarat in 2008. That's India's largest BR, I believe.
Huge area.
Then the Cold Desert BR in Himachal Pradesh in 2009, covering areas like Pin Valley National Park, Seshachalam Hills in Andhra Pradesh, famous for its red sanders trees, designated in 2010. And the last one listed in our source is Panna in Madhya Pradesh, designated in 2011.
Okay, that's 18 designated nationally. It shows a real commitment across India's diverse landscapes. But as you mentioned earlier with the UNAB program, national designation is one step. Getting onto that prestigious world network of Biosphere Reserves, WNBR, the UNESCO list, that's another level, right?
It is. That's the crucial distinction, especially for, understanding international recognition and potentially funding or support. Inclusion in the WNBR basically signifies that UNESCO's MAB Council has assessed the site and agrees that it's successfully implementing all three functions: conservation, development, and logistic support. Means the zonation is working, the management plan is robust, there's scientific monitoring, community participation, the whole package.
So out of those 18 national BRs, how many have actually made it onto the WNBR list according to our source?
The source specifies 12 Indian BRs are currently part of the UNESCO WNBR.
12 out of 18. Okay. So that implies that for the other 6, like Manas, Dibru-Sekha, Dahang Dibang, Kutch, Cold Desert, Seychelles, while they are nationally important BRs, they perhaps haven't yet fully met all the stringent international criteria, maybe challenges with balancing development or governance issues.
That's often the case, yes. It's complex. Achieving that functional integration across all zones, especially the transition area, with sustained community cooperation and scientific backup, it takes time and resources. It really highlights that the BR concept isn't just symbolic, it's about effective adaptive management on the ground.
Right, so let's clearly list those 12 that are on the WNBR list. Maybe with their inclusion year, if the source gives it.
Okay, here are the 12 WNBR sites from India. First was Nilgiri, included way back in 2000.
A pioneer again.
Then the Gulf of Mannar, 2001. And the Sundarban, also 2001. Nanda Devi followed in 2004. Then we had a cluster in 2009, Nokrek, Pachmarhi, and Similipal.
3 in 2009.
Okay. Then Akhnakmar Amarkantak made it in 2012. Great Nicobar was included in 2013, Agasimala in 2016, Kangchenjunga, the high-altitude one, in 2018, and the most recent one listed in the source is Pana, included in 2020.
Pana in 2020. That's interesting, given its history with tiger populations and management interventions. Its inclusion suggests a successful demonstration of that adaptive management and recovery, perhaps. Enough to meet the WNBR standard.
It certainly suggests that the MAB Council saw evidence of effective management fulfilling the BR criteria, including recovery and sustainable practices, yes.
Okay, that distinction between the national list and the WNBR list is really important. Now, let's shift gears slightly to that critical comparative question. We've talked a lot about the BR philosophy and structure, but how does it actually differ in its conservation approach compared to other protected areas we often hear about, like a tiger reserve or a national park? They often have core and buffer zones too, don't they?
They do, which can cause confusion. But the source is very clear on this. Biosphere reserves are not a substitute for national parks or wildlife sanctuaries. They're not an alternative. They're a complementary approach.
Complementary. How so? Let's break down the key differences. Maybe start with the scale, the scope.
Right. The scope is a major difference. BRs are designed for landscape-level conservation. Think big picture. They often cover much larger areas, encompassing a whole mosaic of ecosystems, forests, wetlands, coasts, maybe even agricultural land and villages.
Okay, landscape level.
Yeah.
And national parks or tiger reserves.
They tend to be more focused, usually on protecting specific, often smaller, core ecosystems or habitats, or managing populations of particular flagship species like the tiger or the rhino. A BR is trying to conserve the entire socio-ecological landscape.
Got it. What about the objectives? We talked about the BR's 3 functions. How does that compare?
That's the second key distinction. The objectives. While a national park's primary, often sole legal mandate is strict protection and conservation, a BR has those explicit co-equal mandates for development, sustainable economic and human development, and logistic support research, monitoring, education.
So those development and science functions are formally part of the BR's mandate in a way they just aren't for a typical national park.
Exactly. They are embedded in the very definition and structure of a BR, particularly through the buffer and transition zones.
Which leads to the role of people, the community role. That seems fundamentally different.
Absolutely fundamental. The community role. The source really emphasizes the explicit mandate for community participation in BRs. It talks about the broad basing of stakeholders and actively working towards livelihood improvement through sustainable use, especially in that transition area.
Whereas in a national park, community involvement might be more about managing impacts or relocation rather than active partnership and sustainable use within the area.
Generally, yes. While many parks now engage more with communities, the BR model structurally depends on community cooperation and involvement for its success, particularly in the outer zones. It's built into the design.
Okay, one last point. The policy focus on conflict resolution.
Right, the policy focus. BR policy specifically emphasizes the resolution or mitigation of conflicts between development and conservation. That's an explicit goal, managed through zoning and stakeholder cooperation. In stricter protected areas, conflict resolution might lean more heavily on enforcement or keeping people and wildlife separate. The BR tries to find ways for them to coexist sustainably.
So, landscape scale, broader objectives including development and science, integral community role, and a focus on conflict resolution through cooperation. That really clarifies the distinction. Okay, so what does this all mean? Let's try to pull together the main takeaways from this deep dive into biosphere reserves. What are the absolute must-knows?
Well, the core concept, the big idea, is reconciliation, trying to mesh human life and sustainable economic activity with serious conservation. It's ambitious. And remember, the global framework, It all operates under UNESCO's MAN and the Biosphere MAB program. That's the guide body.
Got it. And for those quick recall points, maybe for prelims prep, the zones are key.
Definitely. Remember, core zone, absolutely undisturbed for biodiversity protection. Buffer zone surrounds the core, allows compatible activities like ecotourism, research, environmental education. Transition area is outermost zone, the area of cooperation, focuses on community involvement and promoting sustainable economic activities.
And the latest Indian additions to that global WNBR list.
According to our source, that would be Kanchenjunga 2018 and PANA 2020. Always good to know the recent ones.
Right. Now, thinking more broadly, maybe from Maine's analysis, the real challenge and the real potential seems to lie in managing that transition zone.
Absolutely. That's where the rubber hits the road. The success of the entire BR model really hinges on effectively integrating local communities into conservation, not just as, beneficiaries, but as active partners. That means proper training, support for sustainable businesses, and crucially, sustained coordination between all the different agencies involved: forest department, development agencies, NGOs, community groups. It requires real governance effort.
Because if the livelihoods in the transition zone aren't sustainable or beneficial, the pressure on the buffer and core zones will inevitably increase, right?
Exactly. It undermines the whole model. The human well-being aspect is not optional. It's integral to the conservation success.
So the Biosphere Reserve concept, it inherently pushes back against that old fortress conservation idea. It sees people as part of the ecosystem, not just separate from it or purely a threat.
It's a fundamental shift in thinking, yes. A structural attempt to make conservation work with people.
Which leaves us with a final thought, perhaps. This BR model, with its science, its zones, its community focus, it offers a potential blueprint for sustainable development within these specific designated areas. But what does it take for that philosophy, this idea of reconciliation, of community-driven sustainable land use to scale up, to become the norm for how we manage landscapes outside these special reserves, across the board, rather than being the exception? That feels like the next big challenge.
Thanks for watching. Follow us on Telegram and Instagram. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.